This YouTube series will cover material that we cover in our Introduction to Astronomy class, from a meteorite found in Antarctica from the planet Mars and the search for life, all the way through to supernovas and black holes. So Galileo has observed the phases of Venus, and he turns his attention, after looking at things like the moon and Venus, the two brightest objects in the sky, to the next brightest object in his sky, and that's Jupiter. And what does he find? He knows Jupiter's a planet because it's wandering, right? Planets are wanderers. They move against the background stars. But what he observes when he observes Jupiter is intriguing. The first night he goes out and observes Jupiter, he sees bands on the surface of Jupiter, pretty cool, but he also sees upwards to, or as many as, 4 little stars. And he says to himself, what's going on here? These stars, interestingly enough, are almost framing Jupiter, and they are along the same line as Jupiter's equator. But he figures they're just stars, asterisms, if you will, miniature constellations, just a lineup of 4 stars that Jupiter happens to be passing through. So he assumes that the next evening when he goes out to observe, what's going to happen? The stars are still going to be there, and Jupiter is going to be moving on its way, as planets do, and that's that. That's, of course, not what he finds. In Galileo's second night of observations, he centers on Jupiter again, and what does he find? That those 4 stars, as many as 4 stars, are there, but they're not in the same spot. The next night he finds 3 on one side and 1 on the other. The night that follows, they move again. Maybe he only finds 3 this night. The point is, he starts to recognize that these things seem to be connected in some way with Jupiter. Now, it takes him 7 nights in his journal before he writes the magic words. He thinks that this, in fact, these are not stars, these, in fact, are moons, natural satellites of Jupiter. And what are they orbiting? You say, wait a minute, they're not orbiting the sun. How does that help us explore heliocentrism? Not everything in the heliocentric model has to orbit the sun. In fact, the moon is known in the heliocentric model to orbit the Earth. So why not other natural moons to orbit Jupiter? So he goes out and makes a number of other observations. He has a couple cloudy nights, but as I said, by the 7th night, he is convinced. Now, if you ask me, I bet you it's the 2nd night that he recognizes that, in fact, these are Jupiter's moons. But he recognizes the imperative importance of this discovery and doesn't write in his notes, which he knows will be part of the historical record, because this is historical stuff. He doesn't write in his notes that these are moons until the 7th night. This, like the phases of Venus, is unequivocal evidence in favor of heliocentrism. So as we discussed in class, is that the end of that? Galileo publishes his work, and we're done? No. As we discussed in class, he still has to fight the number of factors that we talked about at the beginning. Number 1, the powers that be like geocentrism. And those powers have a real stranglehold on the science. The scientific method didn't exist the way we thought it would. And quite honestly, it appeared that the model worked, that model being geocentrism. But now Galileo has added new data to the mix. He's played a role in, if you will, inventing the scientific method that we talked about in an earlier episode. And more people are starting to make the same observations Galileo does. And though he himself does not see this to its fruition, he is the galvanizing agent, the catalyst that gets us to a belief in heliocentrism. In our next episode, we'll talk a little bit about a couple of the other players involved. We've talked about Copernicus and Galileo, uprooting this idea that came from Ptolemy and others, getting us on a heliocentric track. But there are some improvements that can be made on the Galilean model, on the heliocentric model. And those improvements come with Johannes Kepler and then Isaac Newton.